Tara?
Sorry, I thought that I'd unmuted. I will send him another email just to confirm, but he did say that he would attend today. So I'm not sure if he's maybe got the link or not, but I'll send him the link that you've just sent me so that he can come on through that link.
All right. So guys, look, in a very crude way, what we want to do is put SAPMA in a position to be placing before the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition a series of requests. And those requests are basically going to be saying to DTI, you know, we would like protection on the one hand, we would like incentives on the other hand, and I suppose we would like some kind of a measure of parity as far as international suppliers directly into South Africa are concerned. When we had this discussion previously, it became very obvious that virtually every single supplier sees the need for protection in a different way, where in fact we could be talking about designation of, let's just call it part product, which is the what you supply to the manufacturers. Protection could also be tariffs. Protection could be a view taken of treaties, let's just say treaties in general, but when we are specific, let's say treaties relating to BRICS, et cetera, et cetera. So I suppose we are throwing this out to you. And sorry, my name is Ivor Blumenthal, by the way. I'm a facilitator and consultant for SAPMA. But really what we want to do is throw this out to you and say, within the realm and the scope of your understanding of how protection works around the world. And protection itself is not a dirty word and it's not a dirty term. Countries around the world protect their local suppliers and they impose restrictions on imports in the process of protecting local suppliers, where really all that becomes defensible is for the supply of product and part product in the absence of local supply. And so we really want to throw this out to you widely. We have had we've had two good submissions. Tara, maybe you want to talk generally about who those two submissions have come from. Well, I'll talk about the first, and that's Michael Karamanov, who gave us a great submission on machinery and equipment and the need to protect machinery and equipment in terms of intellectual property protection from abroad. And before I ask Michael to speak to his document, Tara, maybe you want to just indicate who the other document came from.
Okay, so the other document was from Deshan Pillay from Actichem, and that's obviously from the chemical side and how just factors affecting the chemical industry and his suggestions. So he's been in contact with or consultation with Bobby from Kansai and Rakesh from Dulux as well. And maybe he can go through the document as well once Michael's completed.
All right, so Michael, maybe we start with you and what it is you were saying in your submission that you think is so critically important for us to take into account, sir.
Well, thanks, Ivor. The short submission was about differentiating where protection can make a difference and where a blanket word could harm both us as a South African business importing know-how and machinery, and sort of differentiating between capital equipment, real money-making know-how, and commodities. The difference being, buying maybe the wrong a container or two of the wrong raw material, which doesn't perform as good, or importing something from China, or buying something locally and maybe being a little bit off in terms of performance. You can still make a plan, and it is normally not a fortune, and you can make a plan around it. You can work it in 10-20% at a time, and you don't buy from the same supplier again. when you buy capital equipment, there are leading firms throughout the world who really have the know-how and quality of machinery, which we do not find in South Africa, and we are in this bracket. The major difference being that having made the wrong decision and going for price or local or support local in the capital equipment sector can lead to a major drawback. You know, when you have a machine that performs 50% compared to your international competitors, you can be as locally sort of affiliated as you want, but you will not be able to compete. So that's all I would like to say about it. I mean, it is machinery, capital equipment, building a plant altogether. Yes, we think in South Africa that we know everything, yet we always get surprised when someone can land a product cheaper than we can produce it for. So many reasons for that lie in the secret of know-how, machinery, plant design, and this is something where the whole world has become smaller, and this is the resource we are tapping into.
So, Michael,
we are not trying to sabotage any local machinery manufacturers. We are far above and very different to them.
So,
yes, Albert.
Are we not saying that the very minimum kind of protection, or maybe the maximum kind of protection that we'd be looking for here, is the fact that for the import of equipment, there very definitely would need to be a local agency, not an embargo on import, but a local agency who's capable of a 100% support service in the local market, and that where there is local training, where there is a supply chain available that doesn't imply downtime, and that all comes from a good, strong local agency appointment.
Indeed, that's pretty much it. The agent, as in us, well over 60-year-old company, are a reliable local partner, but represent, yes, in a way, foreign know-how.
Okay. Any other questions as far as machinery and equipment, or not questions, but statements, as far as machinery and equipment is concerned? Sanjeev, I see you've got your hand up. Sorry, sir. I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to comment?
I see Sanjeev being muted. Maybe I see a little mute button on Sanjeev. Maybe Sanjeev could unmute his mic. Yes, I think now it's off.
Sanjeev? All right. While we're waiting for Sanjeev to come through, anybody else who wants to comment on capital equipment and what sort of submission should be made to DTI as far as capital equipment or capital equipment agency is concerned in South Africa?
My personal view, since no one does chip in there, is that we should keep it strictly separate from commodities. In fact, not even mention it. I mean, if we can do something locally, we will do it. But as I said, if there is a product that there is simply no other alternative, a local alternative, you just go for it. It is just a different.
Sorry, who was that? Is that Sanjeev or is that Paul?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Sanjeev. Yes, we can.
Sorry, I was just, my apologies. Good afternoon, everybody. Michael, great to see you after long. Hope you're well.
Well, greetings from the Caribbean. I'm in the French Antilles island of Martinique at the moment in the boat.
You can enjoy that on our behalf as well. So anyway, coming back to where exactly Michael started off, and yes, I do agree with Michael that when it comes to equipment, or if you want to specify plant and equipment for paint manufacturing and or other raw material manufacturing, i.e. resin, polymer, dryers, etc., etc. And I think we need to bifurcate or divide raw materials from plant and equipment. And I think that should be our first point of departure, because as Michael said, is that you might be in a position to manufacture some of the equipment locally, but would it be at the same sort of standards and efficiency of what an international equipment manufacturer might come up with in those particular fields of manufacturing is a valid comment.
So Sanjeev, I just want to stop you there for a second and say, if there is any mention of the application of standards to differentiate and distinguish, the question is always going to be asked, where are those standards coming from? And in fact, who is going to be the arbiter of those standards?
Correct. Now, to answer you, first of all, we need to, are we specifically talking about the feedstock going into the paint industry, or are we talking about capital equipment? Now, that's exactly two very, very different sort of products. And I think that's where we need to draw the line and tell them that as far as capital equipment is concerned, it might be a very different scenario, and one might need to still sort of bring in imported equipment, or equipment that South Africa is still not capable of manufacturing to that efficiency levels. However, when it comes to raw materials or feedstock, that is a different story, where you have local manufacturers. When it comes to dryers like Ectichem, when it comes to resins and polymers, you have BASF, you have Dow, you have Ferro, you have ourselves. So there are a number of manufacturers when it comes to feedstock. So that's my reason, is that we cannot put it as one.
So Sanjeev, let's assume that we've spoken about capital equipment that has to be imported, and has to be imported with a local agency, with 100% support service, local training, and a supply chain, just-in-time supply chain with no downtime. Okay, so that's relating to capital equipment which cannot be sourced in South Africa. When you talk about raw material and feedstock equipment, and you're saying that it can be manufactured and sourced in South Africa, what sort of protection would you be looking to DTI for to make sure that the local manufacturers and suppliers were protected, properly protected?
Okay, so when it comes to raw materials and feedstock, obviously the most common of them being tariffs, which is clearly on the top of the list. That your tariff headings have to be sacrosanct, and not only sacrosanct globally, but even from BRICS or from the free African trade, which currently is brewing on the horizon. A typical example of that would be manufacturers of same in Egypt. If Egypt, suddenly the free African trade kicks off, then you would have duty-free product coming in from Egypt. If there is duty-free across the BRICS nation, you'll have the floodgates open from China and India coming into South Africa. So
what you're talking about, Sanjeev, then is the designation of raw material and feedstock equipment in South Africa.
Not equipment, just raw materials and feedstock. Let's not bring equipment. We are mixing the two. Equipment is the capital equipment where you will make the product. The raw material is the feedstock that goes into the paint manufacturing. So I think that's the sort of division that one needs to be aware. We are not talking of raw material equipment. There is no raw material equipment per se. Raw material equipment, if we have to bring in for IE, for the plants as well, those are predominantly imported. I don't think there is anybody capable of manufacturing a reactor locally.
Why?
No expertise either. There is no company manufacturing. Majority of all the reactors that have been manufactured on all major plants in South Africa have all been imported either from Germany, from Europe, other countries in Europe, India, Far East Asia. So my thing is that we are mixing the two issues. We are not talking, Michael is talking from an equipment point of view.
No, all right. No, fair enough. So you're quite right. You've made the point. Raw materials and feedstock. We'll be talking about looking to protect local manufacturers through the process of designation and the imposition of tariffs.
Correct. That would be the and imposition of tariff not only globally, from even in terms of the free
applying
African
to BRICS and applying to the African Free Trade Agreement as examples.
Correct. And we would have to ring fence that pretty much that. So that would be the first thing that raw material suppliers like Deshen, Actichem, like Ferro, like ourselves, BSF, etc., Dow would want implemented. Secondly, what we would obviously want implemented is in terms of special dispensation on electricity tariffs. The electricity tariffs that we are currently having. South Africa traditionally 20 years ago used to be the cheapest in electricity tariff, far cheaper than Europe. Today, we are 5 to 7% more expensive than electricity in Germany, which is absolutely crazy.
When we've got electricity.
Can you just say that again? So South Africa is?
See, South Africa 20 years back when, I personally had done that survey because we were looking at a greenfield plant that we put up about 21 years back, okay? And at that particular stage, South Africa was 20 to 25% cheaper on electricity than the European counterparts. Today, 21 years later, we are 5% more expensive than any similar plant in Germany.
Sorry, just say that percentage again, 5 to 7% more expensive.
Correct, on an average.
Okay. All right. So we've said tariffs, we've said special dispensation on electricity charges. What else? What else can be put in place to make your lives easier and allow you a more equal base for effective competition?
The third point would be export rebates, especially for companies that are exporting predominantly into the African continent per se. A typical example of that would be that Egypt today has got export subsidies in the tune of about $1 billion, where any freight and not necessarily any product that is manufactured locally, whether it be dryers, pigments, resins, etc., the freight to any African country would then be subsidized by the government once the product has left and the company proves that it has reached its destination. So you would need all the customs document, you would need everything, you would then need to submit it to the government saying that this is X amount of things I have exported for a particular month, and then they would get an export rebate on the freight element or the freight leg, whether the freight be from Alexandria in Egypt to Durban in South Africa or Mombasa in Kenya, etc. And freight is a huge component today in terms of costing of product or hauling of product from one domicile to the other.
Okay, I'm going to classify that as an incentive as opposed to a kind of protection. The notion of export rebates.
Probably as an incentive.
May I quickly jump in with a comment?
Yes, Michael.
The problem with this exactly incentive, as you call it, and not protection, is that you actually require protection for this type of incentive that another country gives to their manufacturers. How can you compete? How can you compete with someone that subsidizes? This is that's why people are crying in Europe about the subsidy of the French farmers. Yet, so all I'm saying is you need protection from this type of behavior.
So, I mean, if you're just playing it out, you can't really stop Egypt unless it's in one of those free trade agreements, but you can't really stop Egypt from implementing a subsidization of freight mechanism. But what we're saying is that in the light of that, we want the same kind of parity here in South Africa, where our government are prepared to actually pay the same kind of rebates and therefore make our local suppliers competitive.
Exactly. This was my point, and one more point again, without it being our field, but I would like to complicate matters by maybe going back into Sanjeev's words. What about BASF? You call BASF, for example, a local supplier. However, they have plants in India, they have plants in China, and if they choose to import their stuff, yes, they're still a local supplier. But again, how do you protect yourself from actually them importing the bulk of what they're supplying and just having, say, a plant here for your eyes only, just to be considered a local supplier? I'm just putting a little bit of oil in the fire for you.
So what would your proposal then be in that regard, Michael? How do you police against that?
You see, you can't in today's world, is my opinion. That's why I think we should stick to measures that can be quantified, can be measured, and can be controlled. It is pretty impossible to police such an international giant. You can't release Dulux from importing half their products from the Netherlands because they're cheaper to manufacture there. If they want to, they're still a local supplier. They still have a factory here. They're still their factory, but you can't police it, or it's far too expensive and complex to police.
Unless the products are designated products, which incur tariffs and incur, those kinds of penalties.
Or the other option, no, actually, it's not that difficult to police, and I'll tell you why. If you have ring fenced them saying that any company, hypothetically, whether it be BASF, whether it be synthetic polymers, we might decide to open up a plant in India and bring product in at half the cost, right? But if we have ring fenced it by saying is that you are subject to that protection, to that incentive, if 80% of value add has been done in South Africa, or your raw material input is 65 to 80% local, and you have manufactured it locally, then it is classified as a local product or a local content, Ivor. And I think that you might be BASF, you might be Dow, you might be anybody, but at the end of the day, if that product is manufactured in the domicile way, 60 to 80% of content is local, then I think it can be automatically policed.
So if you look at what I've put as the third protection, which is a schedule of local beneficiation required, where we specify that for a particular product, 80% local beneficiation, and anything less than that would hold with the tariffs for import, basically. So we could actually.
I would say 65 to 80%, because there are some raw materials that are just not available locally, Ivor, and 80% might just be too much of an ask for raw material suppliers. So yeah. I would say between 65 to 80%, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you know, at this stage, we're not looking at percentages. At this stage, we're really talking about principles.
I would just want to broadly classify, because 80%, you know, if suddenly somebody looks at a document with 80%, they would just sort of start moving tangential. So we could rectify it and give them a ballpark or a range of 65 to 80.
Excellent, excellent. Now that's great. Look, that's Paul. Can I ask you? You've been very, very quiet. Can I ask you for your thoughts, sir?
To some extent, I agree with Sanjeev. As a company who imports raw materials to supply the paint industry, I mean, a lot of what we do isn't necessarily available at the same quality or in the same technical capability locally from a local source. So what we import is mainly additives which are added in relatively small quantities, although they're quite high value. And you know, things like titanium dioxide, which formerly carried a duty because there was a plant in South Africa, there's no requirement for there to be an import tariff if you wanted to level the playing field. And I know that's been proposed previously, and I don't know that it's ever come to fruition because Huntsman closed their plant here. So there's no real point in having a duty on that particular product anymore because it isn't locally manufactured, and unless somebody spends a lot of money to put up a plant, they can't make it locally. So yes, but in terms of where Sanjeev is saying 60 to 80%, it would probably be fairer to keep it at around 60, 50 to 70% rather than 60 to 80, but that's semantics.
Sanjeev, you've got your hand up.
And I mean, we import products that probably compete with something that Sanjeev could make, and some of those carry duty and some of them don't. It depends on whether, what the type of polymer is that you're bringing in. So, again, it's horses for courses. And, we certainly, I agree with him in terms of what has happened previously, where products were imported duty-free as finished goods in some cases, and also direct resin imports from countries like Egypt, which really screwed up the market in terms of pricing, and the quality when it finally got here was suspect, as I recall. But so we also want to prevent companies bringing in product and simply dumping it here because send it to Africa because they won't know the difference. I mean, our technical capabilities are fairly good here in terms of manufacturing, and on the other hand, I would hate to see us become so protectionist that we don't allow competition.
Sanjeev, you've got your hand up, sir.
No, that was an old hand, Ivor. That's perfectly fine. I agree with Paul, because yes, there would be a lot of companies and big trading companies or distributors like Cast and Walker, where what Paul sort of represents, and a number of other companies would represent some very prominent companies globally. And yes, they would want to bring in, but as long as it's a product on par and the local manufacturer is getting an incentive for it being, whether 50%, as Paul said, it's semantics, or 60% local content, then that particular company would be able to compete. So I think that's a valid comment, and I would tend to agree with Paul. As long as the local content ring fences the local manufacturer, whether it be polymers or dryers or pigments or whatever. I'm just taking, those are the three main products that in any case go into paint manufacturing.
So if I can just summarize then, in our submission, what we are asking for is we are saying that we, as far as protection is concerned, we would like to see designation of part product. We would like to see tariffs. We would like to see a view taken on existing treaties, for example, BRICS and also the African Free Trade Agreement. We want to see a differentiating policy where protection can make a difference, differentiating between capital equipment and commodities, as Michael puts it, or between raw materials and feedstock on the one hand and capital equipment, as Sanjeev would put it. As far as capital equipment is concerned, plant and equipment for paint manufacturing and other raw material manufacturing for the coating sector, not sourced in South Africa. We would like to see a local agency, not an embargo on import, where that local agency guarantees 100% support service, local training, just-in-time supply chain with no downtime, where there is no design or manufacturing capacity in South Africa. And that's a separate investigation we would like DTI to in fact have a look at. As far as raw material and feedstock is concerned, we're talking about designation of raw material and feedstock which can be locally produced. We want to see a protection of local manufacturers. We want to see a review of existing duties which do exist. And Paul mentioned that there are already duties which exist. As far as measures taken are concerned, number one, we want to see tariffs. Tariff headings must be revised and applied globally to BRICS and within the African Free Trade Agreement. Number two, we want to see a special dispensation on electricity charges where possible. And here we refer to the fact that South Africa at one stage was up to 25% cheaper than Europe, but now is between 5 and 7% more expensive than Europe as far as the purchase of electricity is concerned in the manufacturing process. We want to see a schedule of local beneficiation required, and at least between, and we've had a variation, 65 to 80%, or in fact 50 to 70%. But as Sanjeev quite rightly says, those are semantics, because we want to see something on the board that doesn't exist in that regard. As far as incentives are concerned, well, we've spoken about one incentive, which is export rebates, especially into the African continent. And we've used here as the example Egypt, where $1 billion of rebates is paid subsidizing freight when it leaves Egypt. And we want to see a similar kind of a focus or mindfulness here in South Africa of incentive opportunities. Have I got it right? And then what else do we want to say in terms of both incentives and possible measures of parity? In other words, the assessment that our manufacturers in South Africa are trading under the same kinds of conditions as manufacturers certainly in other African countries, but possibly globally as well. Deshan, you've been very, very quiet, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Sanjeev. Good to hear your voice after a while. It's been some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Same there.
Yeah. Ivor, can I just quickly update the rest of the team in terms of what our input would be? It fits in, and Sanjeev, I couldn't agree more with what you've mentioned. I fully support all of your comments that you've made previously. Just in terms of Actichem being a specialty chemical supplier, I think what we require from DTIC is to streamline the engagements between the various departments that we would engage with. Specifically, Department of Environmental Affairs, DEET, Department of Agriculture, DAF. Those two would probably be the biggest hurdles in us actually doing business. And when I put together this feedback for Ivor and Tara, I'll just take the rest of the team through to exactly what we're experiencing. We've already started the discussions with DTIC via a gentleman by the name of Henry. So none of this is very new. It's actually already the ball has started rolling down the road. And like Tara had mentioned at the very beginning, we have engaged our various key accounts, Plascon in the form of Bobby, Rakesh from Dulux, and I think we've got their support in actually taking this forward. The first and probably the biggest hurdle that we're experiencing at this point is the importation of biocides, specifically flagging Act 36 of DAF. And I think that's a big hurdle for, if not all paint manufacturers, wanting to put a claim on their packaging. And immediately, the moment you put on kills bugs or kills fungus, it falls within the mandate of Act 36, 1947, which is the Act for Agricultural Remedies. Now, we all know that basically a paint is not a pure agricultural remedy as you and I know it. So what we basically need is some sort of new regulation to be devised that specifically caters to the paint industry and actually allows paint manufacturers and paint producers to regulate their goods, but also allow them to freely market and supply these goods into the consumer market. The biggest stumbling block here is the fact that the costs involved to register in accordance to Act 36, it's enormous. It goes into the millions of rands. And sometimes this becomes a big hurdle in that the margins of profits that are to be made from these products actually doesn't justify a paint producer from developing and formulating a new product. So that's the one big problem that we need is we need DTIC to actually take our fight through to DAF and get a new act or a new regulation to be devised specifically for the paint industry. Now, we're not calling for a non-regulation of paint products or specialty chemicals. We just need to be part of the process in devising a new regulation or a new guideline, as they put it. And I think what this actually would do then, Ivor, is it opens up the paint industry to develop newer, greener, environmentally friendlier products, if not even more modern products, which are in line with the European-based models. That's the first and probably the biggest problem that we experience at this point in time. The second one, which I'm sure a few of our other industry colleagues experience, is the time that it takes for import permits to be processed by DEET and DAF. So typically how the process works is at the time of placing your PO on your overseas supplier, you apply for your import permit, be it DEET or DAF. Sometimes what happens is typically DAF or DEET stipulate a 14-day turnaround time. And lo and behold, it takes 4 weeks, sometimes even 6 weeks, you don't have your permit. And the resulting situation is goods arrive at the port and they are automatically put into a government bonded facility because of the lack of permits. Now, we find this quite unfair on us as a supplier because I've done my bit. I've adhered to the 14-day period. In fact, I've given it to you 3 weeks before. Why should I now be fined for the fact that the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Environmental Affairs are taking too long to actually get these through to us? So one of the suggestions that we've put forward to DTIC is there needs to be an automated system, specifically when you are doing repetitive application permits of the same product type. So this automated system can be done fairly quickly, and I think it'll just ease out the entire situation for most chemical suppliers. I'm sure we are not the only chemical supplier that have experienced this. But I think it'll go a long way in actually trying to ease the burden of importing chemicals at the risk of, or the fear of having it going into a bonded facility. I'm not sure what the rest of the team feels.
Those are two excellent suggestions. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so those are the two. I mean, it's a pity we don't have the rest of the industry here. But I'm pretty sure based on our general conversations, Ivor, it's exactly the same sort of sentiments that they share.
I totally agree. I totally agree with Dishan and Ivor. I think it's just the first meeting, and that's why we have seen quite low representation from supplier members. But I'm pretty sure once we circulate this and they see what the whole forum was about, we might see a few more members getting interested. But I think Dishan has raised some very, very valid points.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Dishan, but also once it arrives, even though you've applied for those permits, there's also an inspection phase,
yeah.
And that can take an inordinate amount of time because you have to wait and you're at the mercy of, because you can book it today and they come tomorrow, hopefully, and yeah, it goes around in circles and it can take up to a week or so. But it should be a very short process. So that's another, and in some cases you end up with it going into the state warehouse with demurrage as well.
Yep.
How long does it normally take for an inspection to take place after the permits are granted?
The inspection is done on arrival, and that you have to book with And in the case of Port Health, I think there's only one person in Durban that does it.
Yeah.
And if you don't get them out at lunchtime,
and then they move it into storage, and you as the consignee of the shipment need to pay that storage for a day or two. So that is already extra cost with no fault of the consignee, whether it be me or Ectichem or Carsten Walker or X, Y, and Z. So it's an added cost. It's which can be totally avoided.
Sanjeev, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and excuse me here because I'm really not wanting to put you on the spot. You've been involved with SAPMA for a while now, and you're about to become chairperson of SAPMA, but you've been involved with SAPMA for a while now. Have these issues not previously been taken up with DTIC or DTI previously?
No, they have been, and no, you're not putting me on the spot at all, Ivor. It's a valid question. We have taken this up with the DTI, but I'll tell you what the problem is. And to tackle the DTI, they need to see numbers. Okay, they need to see numbers from the top 10 or 15 supplier members, and they want to see people at senior level. So when you go in as an organization representing SAPMA, and previously it was just 2 or 3, whether it be Derek or myself and 1 or 2 people, DTI were almost telling, but it's not the whole industry, it's maybe your views. Now, if you have, I'm just taking a hypothetical example, somebody from BSF, somebody from Dow, somebody from Ferro, somebody from synthetic polymers, somebody from Carsten Walker, you've got 10, 15 people at senior level going as a forum to DTI and saying, guys, this is what is happening. This is what your departments down the line are doing. And these are the problems we are facing. Please give us solutions. And that's when they'll catch a wake-up call.
All right, fantastic. Look, guys, we've got 3 good points which have been mentioned as far as measures are concerned. We've got a good point as far as incentives are concerned, and we've got 4 excellent points as far as measures of parity are concerned. Because this last point that's been mentioned is the issue of research, but also representation. And that's something that SAPMA directly should be working on, or is responsible for working on. But we've covered some good ground here. The question is now how we present this in a report back, I suppose, to member companies on the one hand, and then more importantly, how we consolidate it in a report to DTIC. That then becomes our challenge.
Sorry, maybe to interject a quick comment, Ivor, from my side.
Yes.
Again, on the incentives header, why? I know Egypt may subsidize only freight to African countries, but why even mention any expert helps our foreign exchange parity? It's in the country's interest, in South Africa's interest, to subsidize any expert to any country. And every country does it. I mean, we know how much French or German companies or Chinese companies are being subsidized by their own governments to come out on trade commissions with the help of a politician or 2, sort of industry bosses come out and do road shows. Relatively frequent, maybe not as frequent in the last year for known reasons. So all I'm suggesting is take the African continent out. Experts should be subsidized if the country really wants to help their foreign exchange balance.
And a valid comment, and with the current account deficit being in such a bad shape, I agree. Just put exports in general, export incentives, whether it be Africa, whether it be Far East Asia or Middle East, irrelevant. Just general exports.
Fantastic. Guys,
Can I just answer your
yes,
second
Deshan,
question?
please, thank you.
Your second question in terms of how do you take this forward through to DTIC? I think it's very important that although we have these points and maybe the document will grow as days go along, we're going to have to put some sort of numbers or monetary value or loss of monetary value to attach to it, which I think has to come forward from SAPMA members, because the DTIC will probably only act if they see numbers or what sort of effect it's having on industry. So I think maybe some sort of survey has to go out to SAPMA members, asking critical questions. I mean, for a start, Actichem can actually quantify what the loss has been in terms of government bonded warehouses, demurrages, as Paul had mentioned. We can put that into some sort of what amount we've lost over the years. I think a similar sort of thing needs to be done for the other SAPMA members.
Fantastic, thank you. I think the research is critically important. I mean, to be honest,
Yeah.
I'm seeing the lack of research as impacting even on our labor relations negotiations that are going on in terms of wages and conditions of employment. We need to focus on research, I think, for the next 2 years as a major focus of SAPMA's activities.
Yeah.
Good. Sanjeev, thank you. So Michael, Paul, Deshan, Sanjeev, thank you all for helping us to start moving in this direction. We will hopefully have many follow-up meetings. And I know that Andre, for example, is one person who would want to give additional input for us. But there are many of SAPMA supplier members who are feeling as you're feeling. And I think that maybe we are opening up the sluice gates here by having this discussion for the first time. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us here on our SAPMA discussion around our supplier lobbying strategy for the year ahead. We will follow up with an article based on what we've discussed today. We will follow up with a link to today's discussion and setting up a follow-up meeting with DTIC present, I think. So thank you very much for joining us and for taking time out into your supper times.
Cheers, Ivor. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivor, for facilitating. Thank you, Tara.
Thanks, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Cheers, guys.
Bye, Tara. Bye,
And
Ivor.
to those of you who are sitting on an island somewhere, we feel nothing for you.
Michael, that's for you.
Hello, Daniel. Thanks for your commiserations.
Yeah,
Thanks for your commiserations. Greetings till the next meeting.
Bye, Mike.